The sun had barely risen over the hills of ancient Israel when the people first sensed the winds of change sweeping through their land. Once, under the reign of King Solomon, the kingdom had stood united, a beacon of wealth, wisdom, and divine favor. Solomon's court shone with grandeur, the temple in Jerusalem gleamed in the morning light, and travelers spoke in awe of a land where prosperity flowed from the mountains to the valleys. But even in the midst of splendor, cracks had begun to appear, subtle, almost imperceptible at first, yet destined to shape the destiny of nations. Solomon's reign had been remarkable, a golden age remembered for its wisdom, its monumental architecture, and the consolidation of a people under one crown. Trade caravans stretched across deserts, bringing ivory, gold, and exotic goods. Ambassadors and scholars journeyed from distant lands, eager to witness the glory of a kingdom that seemed to touch the heavens. Yet within this magnificence lay seeds of discontent, heavy taxation, forced labor for monumental projects, and the king's own indulgence in foreign alliances and religious practices began to stir murmurs among the people. It was a kingdom built on unity, but that unity was fragile, resting on the delicate balance between ambition and loyalty. Upon Solomon's death, the question of succession loomed large. His son, Rehoboam, ascended to the throne, young and inexperienced, and faced a kingdom simmering with unrest. Delegations of the northern tribes approached him with a plea: lighten the burden of taxation, ease the forced labor, and honor the promises of their forefathers. Rehoboam, confident in his royal lineage yet naive to the weight of governance, chose to ignore their counsel. Instead, he heeded the advice of his younger courtiers, who urged him to assert dominance and prove his strength. This decision was fateful. The northern tribes, led by Jeroboam, rebelled, severing ties with the house of David. Thus, the once unified kingdom of Israel fractured into two distinct nations, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. The northern kingdom, stretching from Galilee to Samaria, would wrestle with instability, leadership crises, and idolatry. Judah, anchored in Jerusalem and the Davidic line, would cling to the temple and tradition, yet face its own trials and ultimate exile. The division was more than political, it was spiritual, a reflection of the struggles of a people trying to reconcile faith, power, and identity. The northern kingdom of Israel became a land of fleeting kings and shifting alliances. Jeroboam, wary of the influence of Jerusalem, established rival centers of worship in Bethel and Dan, installing golden calves to draw the people away from the temple. This act, though politically astute, sowed seeds of spiritual decay. Kings rose and fell, many leaving no mark but the record of corruption and apostasy. Prophets emerged as voices of conscience, challenging injustice, calling for repentance, and warning of looming judgment. Elijah strode across the hills and valleys, confronting Ahab and the prophets of Baal, performing miracles that testified to the power of the God of Israel, yet witnessing a people often unwilling to listen. His successor, Elisha, continued this work, performing acts of healing and protection, yet the kingdom's moral compass remained unsteady. In contrast, Judah, though smaller and less affluent, preserved the Davidic line and maintained the centrality of the temple. Some kings, like Asa and Hezekiah, enacted religious reforms, tearing down idols and seeking the favor of God. They rebuilt cities, strengthened fortifications, and strove to restore devotion among their people. But Judah, too, was not immune to corruption. The cycle of kings rising and falling, righteous and wicked, faithful and rebellious, persisted, leaving the nation vulnerable to the ambitions of neighboring empires. The prophets became the moral and spiritual compass of both kingdoms. Isaiah spoke with clarity and foresight, warning of the consequences of turning away from God, yet offering hope of redemption and restoration. Jeremiah, living in the shadow of Babylonian expansion, mourned the moral decay and impending doom of Judah, lamenting the loss of a people unfaithful to their covenant. These voices bridged the centuries, carrying messages that were as urgent then as they remain today. Leadership matters, faith matters, and the choices of the few can shape the destiny of the many. Meanwhile, the northern kingdom faced external threats that would ultimately seal its fate. Assyria, a rising power in the east, expanded aggressively, its armies merciless and its strategy ruthless. Israel's fragmented leadership, coupled with persistent internal strife and idolatry, left it vulnerable. In 722 BCE, the Assyrians conquered Samaria, bringing an end to the northern kingdom. Its people were scattered, exiled to distant lands, and the tribes that had once formed Israel seemed lost to history, remembered primarily in the warnings and laments of the prophets. Judah's story stretched on longer, yet it too faced the pressures of empire. The Babylonians, who rose after Assyria's decline, cast their shadow over the southern kingdom. Attempts at political maneuvering, alliances, rebellions, and negotiations brought only temporary respite. Nebuchadnezzar's armies eventually laid siege to Jerusalem, breaching its walls, destroying the temple, and exiling the people to Babylon. The Davidic monarchy endured in memory, in prophecy, and in the hope of return, but the kingdom itself had fallen. The exile marked the end of an era, yet the narrative of Judah continued to shape the religious and cultural identity of a people in diaspora. Throughout these centuries of division, the land itself bore witness to human ambition, spiritual struggle, and the weight of history. Cities rose and fell, fortresses were built and destroyed, and the hills and valleys carried the echoes of prophets' warnings. Yet even in judgment, there was a thread of hope. The story of the divided kingdom is not solely one of failure. It is a testament to resilience, to the enduring search for justice and faith, and to the profound impact of leadership and moral choices. The lessons of the divided kingdom extend beyond Israel and Judah, beyond biblical narrative and historical record. They remind us that unity is fragile, that power must be balanced with wisdom, and that the moral and spiritual health of a society cannot be separated from its political structures. The prophet's words continue to resonate. A people who abandon justice and compassion risk destruction, yet redemption is always within reach for those willing to return to the path of integrity and devotion. In reflecting upon this period, we see the human struggle writ large, the desire for security, prosperity, and recognition, coupled with the ever-present challenge of remaining faithful to higher principles. Solomon's wisdom and grandeur gave way to Rehoboam's inexperience and miscalculation. Jeroboam's cunning led to temporary political success, but spiritual decay. The northern kingdom fell, scattered to the winds. Judah endured longer, but could not escape the consequences of repeated disobedience. And yet, through prophets, priests, and the enduring hope of a covenant people, the story of Israel and Judah continues to inspire, warn, and teach. Even today, the echoes of the divided kingdom reverberate through history, theology, and culture. The narratives of kings and prophets, conquest and exile, loyalty and rebellion, offer timeless insights into the human condition. They challenge us to consider how we wield power, how we respond to moral and ethical dilemmas, and how the choices of one generation ripple through the next. In the hills, valleys, and ancient ruins of Israel and Judah, one can almost hear the whispers of history, a reminder of what was, what has been lost, and the enduring hope for restoration and renewal. The divided kingdom teaches that history is rarely linear, that nations rise and fall not merely through force, but through the alignment or misalignment of leadership, morality, and faith. It teaches that even in division, there is purpose. Even in exile, there is potential for renewal. It reminds us that the story of a people is never simply about politics or conquest, but about their relationship with each other, their leaders, and the divine principles they choose to uphold. And so, as we walk among the remnants of ancient cities, gaze upon the ruins of temples and fortresses, and trace the paths of kings and prophets, we are invited to reflect on the enduring human story. The tale of Israel and Judah's division is not just a chapter in a distant past. It is a mirror, reflecting our own struggles with power, faith, and the choices that define us. It is a narrative of ambition and wisdom, of failure and hope, of judgment and redemption. It is the story of the divided kingdom, a history that continues to speak across the centuries, urging us to listen, learn, and remember.